Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. And well, this is a video. I see that there is quite of appreciation about my videos where I explain how I build up this type of vehicles. They are not the conventional kit that you can find around, because as you probably know, I sell the racing cab to do this type of vehicles, and of course I cannot provide the entire kit because they had several different configurations. As you can see here, this is a Fiat 690 690T. T means tractor, and it was a truck from 1955 55 56 from Fiat Veicoli Commerciali. It was the department of Fiat vehicles just for the industrial vehicles, so for trucks and heavy stuff. As I say, they cannot provide a full kit because they had several different configurations. There was the 2-axle, the 3-axle, the 4-axle, plus the trailers, with different configurations. And so I just sell what I call the parts where the model cannot do it by himself, So basically it's the cab, and those were cabs from the 50s, so they were extremely rounded, nothing in common with the stuff that you see around today, that they are very square, that they're completely different design. This is stuff really coming from the past. Now we are in 2024, so it's over 70 years ago. Nearly 70 years ago it was the production of this vehicle. Well, as you can see, this is a tractor vehicle, and it was not so common back in time because in Italy they had some regulation about this type of vehicles, about the number of the axles, about the weight of the complexive truck. So was not so common. It was mostly used like a tanker or like international transport around Europe, the TIR. And let's see how I build up the chassis. The most important is of course to have a proper blueprint of the actual dimension of the real stuff. It's a little bit complicated to find the documentation about this vehicle. As you can see here, this is meant like to be a Fiat 690 T1. Instead, what I built it up here, it is a T2. The difference between the T1 and the T2, it was that the T was slightly following the first version, So the rear hatch of the cab, as you can see there, at the 3 bars on the rear, while this was the previous version, with a lot of markings, on the back side of the cab. Was slightly different in this point, and as well as for the wheel arch, that was taking that simpler configuration that was typical of all the following types. This was a little more worked stuff, like coming from the 40s, from the 40s design. And if you Google a little about Fiat 690, you will find tons of pictures of this truck, because this has been a real workhorse, compared to the ESA Gamma E. This was much more easy to find also in foreigner market. I think they sold it in Holland, they sold it also in Australia, if I'm not wrong. So there was a bunch of trucks going around the world, and around the world this Fiat 690 was named like the Chinese 6, probably for the 6 wheels. And even despite they are 8 in reality, but as you can see, probably it was Chinese 6 for that reason. The foreigners call it Chinese 6. In Italy we never call it the Chinese 6, we call it the Baffo, the Mustache, because you have this front hand that look like a kind of mustache in front of an old guy. The way I build up my chassis, then it's of course to take dimension. These have been taken mostly from the Revel Krupp Titan, because it was completely different in measure and in details, but mostly because all the gouges around the truck, so the bumpers and the protection for the wheels are coming from the same era, so little worked with little markings over, and all these minor details are coming from the same era. The only poetical license that I took in this vehicle was that the original Fiat 690 used to have quite small fuel tank, despite the later one used to have a much bigger one, like used on Fiat 170s and 180. I still have the Iveco logo on the cup filler. We had to check for the period, because these were trucks starting where the production was started in 1955, but they went on producing until until the 70s, you know, when the following cab, that was the H cab, typical for Fiat 180 and 619, that is so famous in South America. It was the squared cab taken by French Unique. It was originally a French cab, it was not at all an Italian cab. This was an Italian one. The other one, the most common one, you know, that you already seen in my video for Fiat 697, for the 170 and so on, was anyway taken from the Unique company. You know, Unique was part of the Iveco group when they started to have Fiat Veicoli Commerciali, plus Unique, plus the German Magirus Deutz. Magirus Deutz was the company making the V8 and the V10, the heavyweight stuff, you know, because they were much more specialized in heavy craftsman of heavy vehicles. So it was everything coming from the Magirus, you know, and developed by Fiat in Turin. How we build up the engine then? As I say, the most important stuff is basically to respect the two main measures of this vehicle, that is the wheelbases, and here is a little bit tricky because we have three axles to manage. Let's turn it so we are in the same direction of the blueprint. Slightly base. This model I will not complete it now, but I will wait some month, you know, because now I have to leave. So this will sit here in Sweden for a couple of months, waiting better weather to arrive. And let's see. So as you can see, I try to place some markings here. Let's try to center it to be a little more precise. More or less. It's everything, of course, a temporary assembly of the vehicle because it is not complete. I have to paint it, so of course it's not anything is fixed here. But as you can see, the first proportion that you have to respect, in the beginning you keep the basic leather chassis measurements, you know, and it is quite much more easy, you know, even if you work with an old AMT truck or Ravel Group Titan, it's quite easy because it's enough that you maintain this proportion, you know, that is the measure, and you can also obtain the missing measures using this is stuff that you make in the basic school, you know, obtaining the measure when you don't have some. So for example, this G surely was written in the original datas of this drawing. This was just an extraction that I made of a blueprint, and neither the original one, because I took an original shot of the manual of a guy that I met in Novegro in Italy that owned the real one of the 690 T2, the green one, Raffaele, very kindly guy, and he approached me when I built up the first Fiat 682, the green one that was the one that started this adventure in the Chinese 6 world, you know, when I built up the first develop of this cab, that was with this different rear plate instead of that one. This is the second one that I updated during the years, and it was slightly different, you know, but all the measure you can have under. So in the first step you have to maintain the proportion of the leather chassis under. Consider that in this vehicle the motor is probably the less problem because they had not reversible cab, so the engine, even if you make a masterpiece on the engine, will be just visible from the under parts, you see. So you just see the oil cap and the filters, and these were the two bullet there were typical for the T2 version because the T1 had a single oil filter down there, so it was slightly different from this one. But as you can see, you don't see so much about the engine, and of course I provided the engine is not so easy to find them. I basically use it here. Let's take it away, the cab, for now, without making damage in live. Here it is. And here we go. As you can see, this is a 6 straight line 6L engine. I just added some minor details, you know, to have the proportion for the front chassis that you can obtain from the picture that you can find online. However, all the people that know that buy my cab, my racing cab, have from me nearly 3,000. Now they nearly became 4,000 pictures of the real stuff with the real drawings that I found around during the years. So that is an incredibly good collection of documentation and references when you build up the truck. And as well as I always say to all my friends that buy my pieces, if you need any type of help, I'm here, so just ask me if you have some questions and so on, because I think I know a little more about this truck right now than when I started. You know, when I started in the beginning, always was problematic for me to find the proper documentation, to find the references of the correct stuff. They all look so similar. Even if you take a series that is the 639 or the 643, that was the Ferrari truck, to have an idea, they look extremely similar to this, like a Zagama and the Zadelta, but in reality they were slightly smaller, the cab was slightly smaller, only the lower part, because the upper part was similar, so it's quite complicated. Always remember that my cab here is meant to be the cab for the heavy series, so 682, 690 and 693. That will be probably the next and missing one that I have in my collection, and then I plan to build it again and see the 682 in another library. You know, this is a 690, so as I said, the motor was a 6 in line. It's slightly different, you know, because this is basically the motor that you can find in a Revel kit. I didn't modify it so much, even if the headers were slightly different. I did add the 4 plugs over there, the 3 plugs, not 4, and it was different lines, you know, also for the pipes and so on. This was a kind of pipe that I place around just to fill it up, the engine that otherwise look quite empty, you know. And then just to respect the lines for the exhaust. And also about the exhaust, there is different ideas, because you know, I made the exhaust starting probably from this line down there, still missing the connection, still in progress. But my truck have the line exiting there. I also added the little rust holes on the exhaust, as you can see. But the original trucks usually had the pipeline, like in the Fiat 180 that I made, that exit here, that exit and the end of the truck, and not a side on the left side of the truck. But then I found picture of real 690s that they all had the exhaust pipe on this side, so I copied them on the real vehicle, you know. So it's nice because you have a kind of freedom when you build up this type of vehicles, and really nobody can tell you anything. Even if you place a Mercedes-Benz engine inside them, they are used that way in Africa. Even if you place a following straight X on an American Cummins engine, nobody can tell you anything, because they have been reworked and used. They are still active in some countries in Africa. There is picture of them in Libya, Senegal, Ghana. In Africa they are really workhorse, because they always work. So they need very, very few maintenance. There is no electronics at all, and the vehicle, until it lasts, because then they melt for rust and for usage, you know, but the vehicle is still reliable. As you can see, this was a double steering wheel, so the first point was to place, I made the proportion for the first 2 axles, you know, and it was important to maintain always this number, so you know that, for example, from the first and the second axle you have 1/485, that divided in 24, this is 24 scale, should become 62, 61.5, 61 millimeter, 0.5 decimeters. So, and became basically 62. So I made my proportion, and the first wheelbase is taken. It is that line, I don't know, with there, you see, a small 62. And from the second and the third axle should become a 98, and from the drawing should be a 97.5. So I think not 100%, but 99% it is correct for the dimension of the wheelbases that you have here, you know. The height of the cab, you have to check it carefully, because, for example, that was slightly different, for example, from the Fiat 690 than from the previous 2 Axle 682, because the 690 was a little lower. Question of millimeters in reality, you know, centimeters in reality, but very, very few stuff. But it was visible little lower than the other one, and you can adjust the height. I usually cut the front part of the final bar to fit under this side of the cab, so this is the reference that you should do in the real beginning, so to set a proper fitment for the main axle, and the wheel should be, of course, centered inside the lower part. The inner part of the cab, as you can see, is still nearly brand new, you know. I didn't work anything, I just worked the real part that, for molding reason, I sell nearly closed here. There is a resin part that you have to rework, but the real overall look should be like this. Then you can also cut this, because inside was slightly different, so there is millions of reference about this truck that I can provide you when you build up this one. But the part that you can see is this one. So the overall look should be this one, this. I think still, after nearly 10 years when I made the original mold of this truck, I think it's still the most convincing Fiat Chinese 6 I've seen around in 124 scale. You know, there was a wonderful model in 114 made by Centauria Diecast, cost nearly $2,000, you know, and it was made in issues, you know, and you can use that like a reference because being so much bigger scale, 114 is the scale of the radio controller truck, so it became 3 times bigger than this. But you can use that like a reference, and I think is extremely similar to what I did here before everybody started to be interested in these vehicles, you know. This was a test shot that I used for the last production that I just did, so right now they are available. Just contact me. I don't know when you see this video. This is the early 2024 when I make this, but if you want to build it up, just contact me and I will explain you everything. Otherwise, you go on my website alsoldatino.com and you can find the PDF catalog and download the updated catalog. I updated the catalog quite often because all my items are just temporary stuff, you know, everything is a limited run. So for example, the 170 cup is nearly expired for the production, and I don't think I will reprint it, surely not in a short time, I mean of years, you know, also because the mold have been destroyed in that fire that occurred in the facility where we produce the resin. So for now we don't have any more copy mold for the stuff. It should be remade. I have the master, but I don't have the mold. This, we just made it, you know. If you have, sometimes you have to choose what to produce. So I produced right now the Esagamma E and this one, the Esagamma being the newest truck that I produced, and this one, as well as the wheels. Always consider that the wheels are so extremely nice in these vehicles. You know, this was the Michelin X pattern that the guy Andrea from KMP part made for me in 3D. The master was made in 3D, and I don't sell the part in 3D because it's an extremely nasty resin and very, very crispy to work with, so it's really a pain in the ass to work with such stuff. So I prefer to produce ordinary resin. This is ordinary resin that you can cut and sand and do whatever you want full, so you never have the problem of the wheel falling apart or melting for the weight because they are full resin. So you can work, and you can also work on the pattern to make it completely flat or to make it destroy. So there is a lot that you can do around this. And that's it. So I mean, when you respect the main part, then all the rest became gouges. You know, remember that all these trucks were quite famous because the motor unit was separated by the gear unit, you know, so the unit had to be separated there. There was a small transmission joint and the air filter there. This is the tanker for the air. They had two tankers, honestly, one there, and another down there that is quite hidden, you know, for the air brake system, you know. Instead, the original one have an air tanker here in this side, plus the filter. Filter should be, the lower part of the filter is that tank that you see down there. And that's it. I think it's extremely convincing, you know, once you refine the dimension of the proportion, as we can say. So the wheelbase and the height of the overall vehicle, the shape is immediately taken. Then it's just a matter of detail or over detail. You know, there is a lot of mini part coming from spare boxes and minor detail. This is quite easy because being so big scale, you can use a lot of minor detail to do the hydraulic boxes that they were nearly all over the chassis. You know, it is still just missing the pipes for it. And this particular case was a little bit tricky just to fix the secondary steering wheel, you know. And you can make also workable system with pins and so on. It's not big issue, but you know, being very heavy stuff, you know, at the end the wheels are very heavy and the chassis is quite heavy, and I don't like people going there to touch my model, so I fixed everything in the right direction, straight forward, and I think that it just missed now the radiator and the interior part that must be personalized, you know. Also this I left in the second kit that I used to sell now. I sell this kit plus the two front hooks and the steering wheel. This because I see that the three bracelet spocket steering wheel is a little bit nasty to find around, and I had the little three because the original truck from Revel provided 4 spocket steering wheel. Instead this one had 3, one typical typical steering wheel from the Fiat, you know, with the double button on the middle. But as well, as I said, being so many different configuration and being so famous also abroad, depending from the country they were. In Italy they were mostly right and drive, while in the other country they were mostly left and drive. So you have to decide. And being in these conditions, you know, you can choose which side you can place the steering wheel and eventually the column of the steering part on the chassis. You know, on this part they place everything on the right side because this was meant to be an original Italian vehicle, you know, and that's it. I think it's extremely convincing, and always remember when you get the cab, always think about the wheels. They are a little bit pricey, you know, because the production for me is a little bit complicated of this stuff, but it's a must, I think, when you do this model to have a proper steering, proper wheels, and the proper details is the best. That's why every time I leave the mud protections with nearly always open so people can see and admire the pattern of this very beautiful tire, you know. That's it, guys. I hope you like it. This was another part of the series of how I build up my trucks, you know, because I see that there is a lot of interest around them, and I hope it really helps in the building, you know. These are very special vehicles. If you can achieve one of this one and you can place one in your showcase, this will be amazing stuff, you know. People will love them so fucking much. So when they see this stuff and they are inside truck modeling and they love this type of vehicles, this is usually a stunner, you know. Still have to decide the final color of the guy. Maybe a red, we will see. Just write me in the comment what is your favorite color. This was mostly white, blue, ugly green, and ugly red color from the 60s, you know. That's it, guys. See you in the next.